Grace and peace be unto you from our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. So did you ever hear of Zephaniah? Zephaniah. He was a person of great contrast. He was loved and hated. He was a person of privilege who lost it all, regained it, lost it, regained it again. He was abused and betrayed. He was thrown into prison, but he also threw other people into prison. He had some incredible bad breaks, but also seized the day when doors of opportunity were in front of him. He was smart, but he also said some really dumb things. His life was a roller coaster ride of ups and downs, twists and turns. In ancient times, Zephaniah was the prime minister of Egypt, the second in command to the Pharaoh. He assumed that role at about 30 years of age. As he put on Pharaoh's signet ring, which meant that was a sign of authority, as Pharaoh renamed him Zephaniah, he would have remembered his past. He would have remembered his roots, his journey that brought him to that point in time. You see, Zephaniah as a kid was named Joseph. Joseph, the favorite son of Jacob, the child who got gifts when others did not, gifts like a luxurious robe. The book of Genesis makes it clear his 10 older brothers absolutely hated him. Didn't say it once, said it over and over. Hated him. This searing disgust for a kid they thought was a brat. A good example of why they hated him, he was a snitch. He would continually give detailed reports to the father Jacob about what a lousy job they were doing tending the flock. That doesn't usually go over well when a sibling does that. And then there were those dreams he would have. Jacob had these dreams, and when sometimes you have dreams, they're best meant to be kept to yourself. But Jacob would say, hey guys, come around, let me tell you this one. I had this dream of how we were all binding sheaves of grain. Suddenly my sheaf stands nice and tall. You all gather around your sheaves and you bow down to me. What do you think of that one? And then he had another one. I had a dream. The sun, moon, and stars bowed down to me. Isn't that cool? That was the last straw. One can imagine the words, obscenities, and the hostility they would have for their brother. So the next time they're out in the fields, this conspiracy emerges. They plot to kill him. But then they decided, well, let's not kill him. Let's throw him into a pit that he can't escape from and let the wild animals come to devour him. Finally, they decided against that. They just said, let's sell him to these people who are on the trade route going to Egypt. Let's sell him into slavery. So he was 17 years old when his brothers sold him into slavery. What the brothers had not thought through was the impact it would have on their father. They brought this coat home, had dipped it into animal's blood, presented it to their father, and he just wailed and wailed, could not be consoled. It's the horrendous, painful reality of losing a child. None of us would ever want to imagine, but that was a pivotal moment in that family's life. But for them, Joseph was as good as dead. Fast forward, meanwhile, Joseph's still alive, but he could have been sold to anyone in Egypt. Could have been sold to anyone. But he is sold to Potiphar, the prominent guard of the Pharaoh. He somehow earns trust, is put in charge of running the house with great freedom. We're told he does it well. But Potiphar's wife, though, has her eyes on Joseph. She's kind of infatuated with him. She keeps making advances toward him. And when he kind of says, no way, she basically says to her husband, he's tried to seduce me. What are you going to do about it? And Potiphar throws him into prison. So he sits there, waits and waits and waits in prison. One day the Pharaoh gets disgusted with two of his workers, the baker and the cupbearer, throws them into prison, same prison Joseph's in. And while they're there, they have a dream. They each have a dream, and they can't make sense of this. Joseph says, hey, tell me your dream. And they do. Joseph says, I understand it. He says, it's simple. To the cupbearer, he says, what yours means is in 3 days, you're going to be released. You're going to get your job back. You'll be with the Pharaoh again. And to the baker, he says, yours is easy as well. In 3 days, you're going to be executed. But both came true. Both came true. The one thing Joseph had said to the cupbearer, though, he says, when you get out, remember me. Remember me. But he didn't. He didn't. He went back working to the Pharaoh. Many years go by, and Joseph just rots in jail. One day when Joseph was about 30, Pharaoh had this series of dreams that puzzled him, that troubled him. No one could help him. And it was in that moment the cupbearer, kind of a light bulb went off. There was this guy in jail who interpreted a dream for me, and it came true. Maybe he's still alive. So they went, found him, brought Joseph in front of the Pharaoh. He interprets Pharaoh's dreams, meaning he understood, he saw it as a prediction of what's going to happen. 7 years of great prosperity in the land were going to be followed by 7 years of famine. So Pharaoh says to him, what do you suggest we do? What do you suggest we do? And Joseph lays out this strategic plan, this great strategic plan of how to manage in times of plenty and want, how to be organized and proactive. And Pharaoh says to him, well, you are my man. You're my man. I appoint you to help me do this. He puts him second only to him, renames him at that moment Zaphenath-Paneah, second in command. He gets married and he has 2 kids pretty quickly, and he names those kids symbolically to describe his journey to that point in his life. The first one he names Manasseh, which means God has made me forget all my hardship. And the second child was named Ephraim, which means God has made me fruitful in the land of my misfortune. But as I read that, to me, he still remembers the past. He still remembers the pain. He still remembers that horrible day that probably still haunts him and certainly haunts his brothers. But 7 years of plenty occur. It says the land produced so abundantly that they literally stopped counting the inventory of grain that was being accumulated. It was so plentiful, it says, it was like sand of the desert. That much grain was being produced. Then a great famine hit countries everywhere, it says, but only Egypt had planned, only Egypt had grain. But more important to see is Pharaoh had grain because Pharaoh owned everything, lots and lots of it. But what you need to see is what comes is not a humanitarian relief effort for the world. Remember this, Pharaoh sold the grain. He sold the grain. And he got richer and richer and richer in this time of suffering for humanity. And Zaphenath-Paneah was the chief architect behind it all, which makes him kind of a complex man in a biblical story. But that's really a sermon for another day, but I feel guilty not at least voicing that to you. The land of Canaan is impacted. They are suffering. And so the 10 older brothers were sent by Jacob to go to Egypt to buy grain, to buy it. And the youngest brother, Benjamin, stays at home. Only the 10 go. They find their way to Zaphenath-Paneah, and when they get there, they don't recognize him. But, of course, he recognizes them as his brothers. 20 years or so have gone by, but the actions of that painful day have certainly lingered. He remembers it. Joseph starts questioning them, calls them spies, throws them in prison. A few days go by, he brings them out. Then he sends one of the brothers back to prison, then sends them back home saying, bring your younger brother Benjamin back, and if you do, I'll release this other brother. But he sends them along with grain, and what they discover later on is that they've not taken any money. They've put all the money in the bag and let him take it home. So it was a free gift. When they get back to Canaan, Jacob hears this story. He's distraught. For him, another son is going to be killed. He's lost another son, and he can't be consoled, just like what happened when his son Jacob was supposedly killed. The brothers, when they see their father wailing, have to remember what they had done so long ago. But when all the grain that they had brought back was consumed, Jacob says, go back and get us some more grain and take Benjamin with you. My life is already a mess. I've already lost my children. What's the big deal if I lose another one? He's sort of given up. The brothers arrive in Egypt with Benjamin among them. They go to Zaphenath-Paneah's house. They're told by the servants, he's going to meet you here at noon. And Zaphenath-Paneah shows up. And then he quickly sends all the Egyptians away, says, get out of here, get out of here. It's a private moment, only he and 11 brothers. And so the 11 brothers look at this Egyptian leader, Zaphenath-paneah, this person with incredible power and might. And he reveals to them, I am your brother, Joseph. I am your brother, Joseph. Is my father alive? And you can imagine the eyeballs just popping out of their head. And also the panic and fear that probably set in at that moment in time. Remember what we did to Joseph. Remember what we did. Zaphenath-paneah could call this army to basically slaughter them in that moment if he wanted. But that's not what happened. Remember, he says, do not fear. I am your brother. Your brother. He hugs and kisses them. And the kiss, what you see, is a sign of peace, shalom, saying we're in this together. You know, Charles Stanley once wrote, there have been times when I felt as if I was on a ferris wheel, going round and round, experiencing the same hurt over and over and over and over again. It's in those moments I plead to God, saying, God, I've already been through this. What are you doing to me? And Stanley said, it was almost as if God said, you're right. Let me let you off this Ferris wheel once and for all. Today, Joseph is helping his brothers off that Ferris wheel of regret. And he is joining them. They're getting off together. They're going into a future that God had planned for them together. That's ultimately what forgiveness does. It lets us off the Ferris wheel. It shapes a new future. It is powerful. It is mighty. It restores. It overcomes. And it enables us to sing out the song that Archbishop Desmond Tutu once wrote that we sang this morning. Goodness is stronger than evil. Love is stronger than hate. Light is stronger than darkness. Life is stronger than death. Victory is ours. Victory is ours through God who loves us. Who do you need to forgive? And who do you need to let off that Ferris wheel? Amen.